Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, my name is Emily Winslow and I'm an artist who loves to help others learn watercolor and find joy in painting. Now, if you're new to watercolor, you may be wondering what material should I buy and what kind of paper should I be using, because there's so many different kinds. In today's video, I'm specifically going to be talking about hot press versus cold press. Personally, I use cold press for almost all of my paintings, but today I'm going to be showing you a demo of each type of paper to show you the differences on how the paint looks when it's laid down on the paper, how the water to paint ratio goes, and hopefully that will help you as an artist determine what kind of paper you want to be using when you're starting your painting. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I'm going to do two of the same painting on each hot press and cold press paper. So I'm going to do a little bit of a landscape and then a flower jar, and we're going to see how they look on both pieces of paper. Now, hopefully you can see this through the camera, but you should be able to see an immediate texture difference. As you can see, cold press has a lot more texture in it, whereas hot press is completely smooth. So let's go ahead and start with the landscape. So I'm going to mix up a blue color and we're just going to go ahead and do a sky. Now, I primarily, like I said, I like to use cold press, especially when it comes to landscapes. So hot press, the paint doesn't settle into the paper as much. And so as you're going to see, it's kind of laying on top of the paper a little bit, which kind of makes it a little bit tougher to blend. But again, it is really up to the artist's preference on what they like to use. Now, if you make prints of your work, hot press might be a nice option because it has less of that texture to the paper. It looks a lot maybe cleaner if you make prints. I still make prints with cold press and they still look fine though. So I laid on just a nice clean coat of the sky. We are going to come back and put in the grassy area once it has dried a little bit. So I'm going to move over and do the same sky on cold press. Now I'm just going to swipe in that color, and for me as an artist, I just find cold press a little bit more relaxing to paint with because I know that it's going to be a little bit easier to manipulate the paint and blend it with other colors a little bit easier than hot press. I find that with hot press, you kind of have to swipe it all on at once and you can't really add in a ton of colors just because it dries, I don't want to say quicker. In fact, I think hot press, it dries a little bit slower. I think it's just that with cold press, you have a little bit more time to blend in the colors, and that's what I like about it a little bit more. As you can see, the colors just interact differently, whereas if I take some more paint and go back to hot press, it kind of doesn't have that bleed as much. It's kind of staying on top, and that's okay. Some people might like a more layered painting. I just like when paintings blend in a little bit more. So as you can see, it just interacts differently. There's pros and cons to using each for different things. But because I am primarily a landscape painter, I use cold press most of the time because I love to have those soft and blended skies a lot of times. All right, now I'm going to mix up a bit of green here, and we're just going to lay a bit of a landscape on the bottom of our sky. So let's just go ahead and do a simple green on the bottom here. Maybe we'll do a little bit of a tree line on top afterwards. So the paint just goes on very nice and smooth on hot press. And I feel like it makes for like straighter lines if you like that. So if you're doing architecture, it might be a good idea to use hot press. Whereas cold press, you just have that more rough and loose look, which again, I always go for. Forgot to mention it, but the brand I'm using right now is Master Touch. It's from Hobby Lobby. But with any brand you use, the differences between these two types of paper are going to be the same. So now I'm just going to add a bit of a tree line just to see how it looks when we put wet paint on areas that have already dried. So like I said, I feel like it's just going to be more stiff in cold press. So it's just going on very easily. And I always think this is such a simple way to practice just by doing a simple sky, grass, and tree line. It always makes for a very simple yet elegant painting. And then I'm just going to go ahead and add a little bit of shadowing in here. So I'm just taking a little bit of a bluish green and adding that to the left side of some of our trees here. So to me, the hot press painting, it almost looks a little just cartoony, which is okay. You know, if that's some people's style, and I feel like I'm bashing hot press paper and not meaning to. It's just, I always go for cold press. But I just think it's so important as an artist to know the difference and to use whatever you like. And you know, everyone's style is so different. So I encourage you to just play around and try out the different kinds of paper. There's even more kinds than cold press. There's kinds of textured paper. So you can just buy a bulk and try it all out. Okay, so now I'm gonna do the same thing. Do some trees on this side. So we're just going to so we're just adding in our paint here. Now to someone who may not, now because you're watching this on camera or on a screen, it might look a little different. So to you, it might look like they're very similar. And to be honest, they are pretty similar. I just can see a much bigger difference here in person. So like I said, I encourage you to try these out on your own. I think you'll get a good feel for it. The more you play around with it, I actually, when I first started using watercolors, I bought this like huge bulk of hot press watercolor paper. And I don't know why I did that, because I didn't really know much about it. And I just have it kind of laying there because I don't use it a ton, but I do want to start, you know, maybe experimenting with different styles. So maybe it's something I will pick up in the near future. Okay, so I hope that, you know, if you're watching on a screen, I still hope you're able to kind of just see the difference between these two paintings. Overall, you know, they're pretty similar if you just take a look at it. But I think the main differences is just that this one looks a little bit looser. This one looks a little bit tighter and, you know, clearer lines and stuff. So again, totally up to your preference. With landscapes, I always go with cold press. But let's now see how it plays out with more of a different type of painting. So we're going to do a flower jar. Okay, so for this flower jar, I'm mixing up a little bit of a grayish blue color, and we're going to start light here. So again, let's start with a hot press, and I'm just going to start going in and painting the jar here. I'm just going to start going on the edges around the jar. So again, I feel like the paint is just going on and kind of laying there on top a little bit of the paper. So a part of the reason why I do enjoy using cold press paper is because it just soaks into the page a little bit differently. The hot press paper, I do think that it looks better when you're needing to have those straight lines. So now let's see how it looks when we layer on a little bit of a darker pigment, and we want that to be on the outside of the jar here. Okay, so now I'm going to take some paint and just kind of place that a little bit here in the middle. I'm going to make it look like there's a little bit of a line of water here. I am kind of liking how it's almost looking a little bit like an abstractish painting, which is a little bit different from my own style, but I do like how this looks. I'm going to take a little bit of a purplish color and just add that in again, continuing to layer on. I always like to paint jars because I think it's fun to like get it to look like it's see-through. With anything in watercolor, I like to make it have that optical illusion that it's like the real object. Maybe I will have to play around a little bit more with hot press. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing we just did. Before we go to the flowers, I'm going to do the same jar on the cold press paper. So let's go ahead and again add that in just like we did on the other side. So I'm just feeling like I have less stress when I'm working with cold press paper, because I know that I can go back and adjust the coloring a little bit, whereas I was feeling feeling hurried with the hot press because I had to get it on and I had to get the paint in the right position that I wanted because it's hard to manipulate that. So that is a pro to cold press here. Okay, let's go in and add some darker colors just like we did on the other side. See how it's just interacting a little bit more blended on the other side. It was like more choppy on this side, whereas here it's blending together. And again, it's just a preference of whatever you are looking for as an artist. So once you give these two papers a try, I'd love if you reach out and let me know which one you prefer. I'm always curious to hear from other artists who use watercolor, what they like better. I'm just gonna go in with a teensy bit darker color. Okay, now that we have the jar done, let's go ahead and move to the flowers. I'm gonna say, I do think I prefer the hot press jar this time. So now let's see how the flowers add on to it. I'm gonna mix up a little bit of a reddish pink color here. And let's start with this. I'm just gonna tap that in here. I always feel like it just starts a little bit blocky whenever we add paint, just because it settles in very quickly. So I'm just adding that in as quickly as I can. I'm going to add like a darker red to this and see if it blends well. Let's put that, we're just gonna put this towards the center of the flower. And now let's go ahead and maybe add some yellows in here. So I'm mixing up a nice, really light yellow. So let's just go ahead and add that in. I'm making these like more of a dotted motion, so it's kind of not too realistic. It's kind of, I like to say my work is more impressionism more than anything. And then maybe one other color. So how about a nice light purplish color? I'm just adding that in here. And I'm gonna leave that be before we add in our greenery, and we're gonna go over here and do the same thing. So let's first add in those red pinkish flowers. And same thing, just adding in those same shapes here. I love doing flowers just because the way I have my style, I don't have them too exact. I know there's artists who do really good, like realistic flowers, but I also think it's just so fun to just play around and drop in colors and make the bouquets have different textures and flowers to them. We're gonna drop in some of our darker tones here. So just putting that in the center of the flower. And then I'm going to go back in, and then we're going to do our yellow flowers like we had over here, just in dotted motions. I wish I knew the name of all these flowers. I don't know. I've just seen so many photos of flowers that I kind of just go off of imagination, but I don't know what the actual names of these flowers are called. We're just going at it, making some dotted motions. And then let's do the purple flower over here. Okay, and then now let's go ahead and move on finally to the greenery in the flowers. So I'm going to mix up a green, and we're just gonna add that in. And we're just gonna lightly add this in around the flowers. So we're avoiding the top of the jar, just following our lines. And then I'm just gonna make sure we have a thin line to make a stem, a little bit of greenery above the flowers maybe. Now I feel like I'm needing to be a little bit more careful here because I don't want it to interact too much with the flowers. Something else that I am noticing about the difference is I feel like it's a little bit easier to remove paint from cold press rather than hot press. And I think it's so important with watercolor to kind of have that ability to remove paint. Watercolor as it is already a medium that I feel like you need to plan a lot, and it's just hard to make changes when you've already laid paint down. So I think that's one of the pluses to cold press. That's just a little bit easier to make those changes. So we added in our greenery on this side. Now let's go ahead and do it to this side. Again, we're just following the top of our jar here, making a leaf here, maybe some stems. I feel like it's a little bit easier also to make thin lines on cold press for some reason. I don't know. I was having a hard time making a thin line, and I mean, obviously I could use a thinner brush and that would help, but usually, I don't know, it just was a little bit hard on cold press to do that thin line. Finally, just adding in some of those darker greens. Now, as you can see, I worked with my flowers still being wet, so that's kind of a con here, is it took them a lot longer to dry, and so I'm kind of messing up my flowers a little bit. But that's okay. It's just a practice. So then let's add in our stems. And yeah, I'd love to hear which one I'm doing that you like better. I think I have my opinion. I'll tell you that at the end. But like I've kind of been saying, I've have a little bias, I think, with cold press. It's just the one that I use the most. I think I might have surprised myself though that I like the hot press flowers a little bit better. All right, now that we're done, let's just take a look overall. So in my opinion, I think the cold press landscape is better. This one just has more of a 2D feel to it, which is okay. And then for the flowers, I mean, I think they both look good. I almost like the blockier feel that I have with this hot press. But in general, I think cold press was just, it felt easier to paint it and more relaxing. So yeah, that's about it for these two. I obviously have told you throughout this video I prefer cold pressed paper over hot press, but I think there's always a time and place for both of them. So let me know in the comments below which one you like better, and I hope this video was helpful for you. I hope this video helped you learn the difference between hot press versus cold press, and that it brought you a little bit closer to making a beautiful painting. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions regarding the type of paper or paint that I use, and I'd be happy to make another video on it. Or you can find me on social media at Emily Winslow Art on all platforms, and you can reach out to me that way, or I'd love to see photos of your work if you want to send them to me. So as always, if you can subscribe to my channel and like this video, that would be so appreciated. And I can't wait to make more videos to help you all learn watercolor. Until we paint again next time.